Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove here today with another Omnibus review, and today I'm going to start taking a look at a run which I think is really long overdue for me to look at on the channel. Being both a Fantastic Four and John Byrne fan, it makes sense for me to finally take a look at the Fantastic Four by John Byrne Omnibuses Volumes 1 and 2. So in this video here today I'm going to be taking a look at Volume 1, and as soon as I can I plan to move on and take a look at this second volume as well and cover the whole thing. Both of these books are definitely full of great stuff, really great Fantastic Four run overall, and they're both set to be getting reprints later on in 2022 as well, so that's obviously great news if you don't have these books and are interested in picking them up. So yeah, without any further ado, I'm going to dive into Volume 1 here and now, take a look through this one, see what the book's all about. Okay then, so here we are with the Fantastic Four by John Byrne Omnibus Volume 1. Now, I'll just point out first of all that this particular edition of the book that I've got here, this is a second printing which came out I think back in 2018, but as I mentioned in the introduction there, the book is getting another printing set to be released in September of 2022 I believe, at the time of recording this anyway. So hopefully that'll be out before much longer, which is of course great news for anybody who's interested in picking up this book. But maybe if you're unsure yet as to whether or not you are interested in picking this up when it gets that next reprint, well, perhaps I can help you make up your mind today by giving it a look through this book and sharing some thoughts on it. So let's just take a look at it then in more detail, starting with the dust jacket. What we've got here on the cover is the standard variant for the omnibus. It certainly was when I picked it up. I believe it's the standard cover for the new printing when that comes out as well. A really great piece of artwork here by John Byrne, featuring, of course, the Fantastic Four themselves, but also a whole bunch of other Marvel characters, and even Stan Lee creeping into the top corner there. This is actually the cover to issue 236 of Fantastic Four, and that was a 20th anniversary issue for the series as a whole. So a great cover for a special issue there. Looking at the rest of the dust jacket, the spine is quite plain and simple. I don't know if they're going to change that. There's a chance, I think, that it could change to that smaller text size in the new style that Marvel tend to do these books in nowadays. Maybe they'd put a little an image down there across the spine at the bottom. I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say they probably will change it. Just something to be aware of. I know it's not necessarily a huge problem, but yeah, it could be a difference. The back of the book then shows the issues for each of the comics collected in here, and it's just a classic cover gallery as you often see on the back of a Marvel Omnibus. And you get your contents down there at the bottom as well. Feel free to pause and maybe take a look at those if you want to just have a read through. But basically it's pretty much the first half of John Byrne's run on this series, as you'd expect when it's split into a couple of omnibus volumes. The hardcover itself, pretty plain design. You've just got Fantastic Four omnibus there. Spine is the same on here, and the back was plain. So again, these are designs that could possibly change a little bit with the new printing. We will wait and see, of course, but overall I'm sure it'll be very similar. So, taking a look inside the book then, let's just get this out of the way and give a spoiler warning first of all, because I will be flicking through the book in a fair amount of detail and discussing some of the kind of key plot points of things that happened during this run of issues. I'm not going to attempt to cover everything because there's a lot of stuff in here to get through, and it would be a very long discussion if I tried to do it all. So, always just like to point that out, but I'm not going to try and talk about this in full, complete detail. But nevertheless, I may end up saying something or showing something off that you don't want to see or know about. So if you've never read John Byrne's Fantastic Four run before and you don't want anything spoiled, then just a fair warning. But let's take a look then. So you've got a contents page here, which is, always nice to see because that's not always a given in an omnibus. But the first thing that we start off with then is a couple of Marvel team-up issues and then a Marvel 2-in-1 issue. And then we start to jump into issues of John Byrne's first stint on Fantastic Four. And I'll talk about a little bit what I mean by that as we flick through it now. But I have to just say, before I even really say anything about any of the stories in here, I already mentioned in the introduction that I am a John Byrne fan. If you've seen any of my reviews of John Byrne books in the past, you will probably already know that. He's one of my favourite creators. I think his artwork is generally excellent. And I think that certainly applies through here. This really is a book that for me is just full of some absolutely stunning, beautiful artwork. I don't think that Byrne's artwork quite hits the heights of his work on Uncanny X-Men, being inked by Terry Austin. I think for me that will always be my very favourite John Byrne work, but I think this Fantastic Four run as a whole probably comes in as a pretty close second for me when it comes to John Byrne's work and his different runs on different series over the years. So Of course, you know, I'm a little bit biased, I will freely admit that, and, you know, it probably comes as no surprise that I definitely recommend this run if you are in any way a Fantastic Four or John Byrne fan. So probably worth just saying that straight away. You know, there'll be no secrets here, no controversial opinions really of me saying that this isn't worth reading or anything like that. This is a run that's highly praised, generally highly regarded, I believe, by a lot of people. And yeah, I have to go along with that and really just echo those sentiments, because this is a run that I had a huge amount of fun reading. But I mentioned that this first run of issues in here is Byrne's first stint on the book, and what I mean by that is John Byrne's run, kind of the proper run, starts off really with issue, I think, 232. But prior to that, he'd worked on a number of issues here as just the artist, and the issues were primarily written by Marv Wolfman. And that's what these first run of issues are. So what we're seeing here is those first few, before Byrne's kind of real run kind of kicks off with him both writing and working as the artist. He was penciling the series for this this set of issues. And whilst he was doing this, this was actually alongside Uncanny X-Men as well. So he was working on that with Chris Claremont, co-plotting the X-Men, of course, on there. But at the same time, he was doing the artwork for a few Fantastic Four comics at the same time. The guy was keeping busy, you know? But producing excellent quality work on both series, even from this early stage on Fantastic Four and his first few issues on it. But these issues, you know, they're not as good as the later ones where Byrne is writing it, you know. So there's nothing wrong with them really. And what you do get to see here as well is Byrne being inked by classic Fantastic Four inker Joe Sinnott, who of course inked Jack Kirby on the Fantastic Four for a long time, for about 50, maybe 50 or 60 issues, I think. Sinnott was inking Kirby on this series back in the day. And, you know, I mentioned before when I discussed my Fantastic Four by Lee and Kirby omnibuses, when I've reviewed those, I honestly think that Jack Kirby's artwork never looked better than when it was being inked by Joe Sinnott. I just think he's one of the all-time great inkers, and equally here, he makes Byrne's artwork look pretty fantastic as well, you know, which is fitting given the series that they're working on. But this, yeah, it's a pretty interesting story. You know, it's kind of classic cosmic stuff, really. The Fantastic Four, if you're really kind of totally unfamiliar with what the Fantastic Four are like and what the series is generally about, it's very much a sci-fi comic. You know, they are a team that come across aliens and monsters and, you know, time travel, parallel universes, all that kind of stuff on a regular basis. So if you're into kind of classic sci-fi storytelling in general, I imagine you'd probably be able to enjoy these comics. That's, you know, if you've never picked up, if you pretty much never picked up a Fantastic Four comic, I don't really know anything about the team, that's probably an accurate summary of what it's about. But if you've got any familiarity already with the Fantastic Four, then I'm sure you know exactly what sort of stuff to expect in here. But if we just kind of skip through these issues a little bit, because honestly I don't have a huge amount to say about these. They aren't the most memorable stories in the book for me. I think it really does get a whole lot better with the run kicking off when Byrne starts to write it as well. I just want to point out as well, though, that I think John Byrne drew a fantastic Sue Storm, or Sue Richards as she is at this point. Although he pretty much drew a great version of everybody, to be fair. But just fantastic artwork here, honestly. Just looking through, I'm just kind of admiring, you know, as is often the case when I cover books like this, I just feel the need to reread it again. This is a cool pin-up page. This is actually penciled by Joe Sinnott as well as inked, so it's, even as it mentions here, it's a rare example of Joe Sinnott but actually penciling something himself as opposed to inking the work of others. But we're pretty much at the point now where the run really gets going, I think, with issue 230, I'm sure it's 232. Yeah, here, classic issue here. Always remember this one. It's just kind of burned into my brain. John burned into my brain. Yeah, so one of the things that I think is great about this run, I'm a fan of the classic Lee Kirby Fantastic Four run. For me, that's some of the greatest comics that there is. It's really classic stuff, and what Byrne you know, was very open about when he started working on this series, you know, writing it as of this point as well as penciling it, is that he himself was a huge fan of that era, and he wanted to kind of take this series, you know, quote-unquote back to basics and focus on the kinds of stories that Lee and Kirby were telling back in the heyday of this series in the 60s. And that's really kind of why it works so well, I think, you know, because the Fantastic Four was just such a fun sci-fi comic back in the day, and not to say it was in any way bad throughout the 70s, you know, in the era between Lee and Kirby and John Byrne coming on here at the beginning of the 80s. For a decade or so, it was just kind of fine, you know, like the 70s Fantastic Four was never bad. You know, I've read through those comics and they're fine, they're fun, there's some good ones, but there's also nothing particularly special, in my opinion, during that era. It just kind of lost its magic a little bit. And then I think that when John Byrne came on, he made such a focused effort on trying to kind of, I guess, reassess the focus of the series and put it back on the Fantastic Four as having that kind of family dynamic where they have their squabbles and they bicker and they argue about little things. You know, there's little bits of character drama and tension, some soap opera dramatics at times, but first and foremost, you know, they're a family and they do love and care about each other, and they'll do pretty much anything for each other when the chips are down. And there's a lot of focus on character development and characterization as well. I think there's a great subplot running through here with Johnny Storm and his girlfriend Frankie Ray, who, you know, she was his girlfriend at this point in time, and there's tension between those two because she's got like a phobia of fire, so that's obviously quite awkward when you're dating the Human Torch. So that causes some issues. I mean, there's a great story here with Ego, the Living Planet. This is really cool. I mean, there's a great sequence in here with Ben Grimm, the Thing, moving with this giant kind of explosive device, this bomb thing, and he's just kind of walking through the I don't know, the tunnels, the catacombs, whatever they are, on the inside of Ego, and it's like boiling hot in there. He's basically roasting to death. You know, but doing it as a kind of heroic sacrifice, you know, and as you read through it, I mean, I'm not really doing it justice, but as you read through it, it's written really well. And it's just a great way of showing how these characters are, first and foremost, you know, they're heroes. The Fantastic Four, I mean, you've got to remember, they're the first superhero team of the Marvel Universe when it really started in 1961. You know, they predate the Avengers, you know, as much as the Avengers are really like the poster team of superheroes these days when it comes to Marvel. The Fantastic Four actually came first, and they were the original superhero team, so they're the kind of team that within the Marvel Universe, they're like the celebrities, you know, within the world, the team that everybody knows and loves and wants to be, you know. So it's great to see them kind of live up to that kind of heroic reputation. That's something Byrne does really, really well throughout here. But here's that issue, though, that kind of special anniversary issue, 236. This is a really fun issue, and this is where Byrne brings Doctor Doom into the story for the first time, and does it in a really kind of interesting and weird way, but such fun. So basically, something is off in this story. You don't know quite what it is, but the Fantastic Four something has just changed from the previous issue to this issue. They're in a new place, they're in a new situation. Things just seem wrong, and it is revealed that what's happened is that on this fantastic double page spread, as I said, I love this, Doctor Doom has trapped them and kind of put them into a tiny miniaturized early 1960s town and forced them to live these weird kind of fictional lives within there. So they then have to figure out a way to break out of that situation in a town full of like fake miniaturized robots. It's just so weird and wacky, but that's exactly what the Fantastic Four is all about. It's crazy sort of sci-fi storytelling like that. And yeah, I mean, Doctor Doom, what can you really say about Doctor Doom? Is just one of the all-time great villains, just excellent. I mean, there's a great story in here, actually. This is really cool. A short story by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, returning to work on the Fantastic Four for the first time since 1970. You know, they came back to do one more collaboration and do one more bonus story for this 20th anniversary issue. So, you know, you've seen some classic Kirby Fantastic Four pencils here. Really great stuff. But yeah, so then we're moving on to the next run stories, and things just keep going. I don't know, it's like, I can't talk about it in so much detail because this video would go on forever, you know, I've already mentioned, but there's a great story here again. This is Frankie Ray. This is Johnny's girlfriend. She discovers there's something going on with her, and what goes on with her is, ironically, given her fear of fire, she actually becomes something very similar to the Human Torch, and she ends up taking the alias of Nova. not to be confused with Richard Rider Nova. And yeah, so she develops these flame powers, basically working pretty much the same way as the Human Torch. But then, shortly after this, okay, so this is pretty cool. So this is where we see, yeah, I almost forgot about this. This is where we see Crystal of the Inhumans, who at this point in time was married to Quicksilver. They have a child in this issue, and this all starts to build towards the point where the Inhumans moved their secret city base to the moon, which I think, yeah, happens in this issue, issue 240. See Black Bolt here, and they end up moving to the infamous blue area of the moon, where there's a breathable atmosphere. Quite interesting that John Byrne moved them to that specific location when not too long before this, Byrne had also co-plotted a very iconic story which took place there in the Dark Phoenix saga with the X-Men. Yes, this is the scene where the city of the Inhumans, which I've forgotten the name of right now in this particular moment, but anyway, it gets levitated to the moon, and the Inhumans settle there, and I'm not sure if they're still there now in Marvel continuity, but certainly they were there for a long time after this. But I just highly recommend this, you know, it's hopefully as I'm flicking through the book, you're getting a good idea of what it's like. You know, there's some great stories in here, as you know, shortly upcoming from this point, coming up, I should say. There's a story with Galactus, a really good story with Galactus, which I think is in issue 242. You know, coming up on that pretty soon, but yeah, 243 even. Well, it's being built up to in 242, but then there's a big climactic clash with Galactus here. This is a fantastic issue. You know, I keep saying that. It's a fantastic issue of Fantastic Four. What can I say? Galactus returns to Earth. Naturally, given the scale of that threat, lots of other Marvel characters get involved, like the Avengers. And yeah, this is a really good story that ends up having some really cool repercussions a little bit down the line, because Galactus had, of course, famously attacked for the first time in the Lee Kirby issues, in issue, what is it, 48 to 50, in that classic Galactus trilogy. And at the end of that story, he's sworn never to return to Earth, never to come and target it and try to eat it again. But here, he's basically driven to total desperation and breaks his oath and comes back, and there's a big fight here. Classic page here, just Galactus falls, and he's beaten and he collapses. And this is a really cool, interesting take. This is probably the standout story in the whole book for me. This is where Galactus is beaten and is dying, effectively. And Reed Richards basically takes the very merciful approach, I suppose you could say, and decides that they need to save him. You know, they can't let him die when it's in their power to save him, even when Galactus is such a destructive force in the universe. It's still their obligation to save a living creature. And they do save him. And furthermore, Nova, Frankie Ray, Johnny's girlfriend, who we've just recently seen, just before this gain her powers, she actually swears loyalty to Galactus and becomes his new herald. And yeah, that's pretty much that. So with that, Galactus leaves. And the story could well have just ended there, but what's really cool is when the repercussions of Reed's decision there to save Galactus when he could have been allowed to die come back and play a part in the story a bit further down the line, which I believe is in volume 2, if I'm remembering rightly. So I will, of course, discuss that when looking through that book. But yeah, really, really great story. Classic Galactus story. That's probably a series of issues I'd recommend everybody read, even if you don't check out this entire run. But yeah, Doctor Doom, back again, you know, just one of my favourite villains, written really well consistently throughout here in John Byrne's run each time he utilises the character. This is a really cool run, I think, where, where, just a great double page spread here as well, where Doctor Doom tries to enlist the help of the Fantastic Four and form a temporary alliance to save his home country of Latveria. So yeah, they end up teaming up a little bit there, but of course that alliance doesn't last very long. Yeah, see the Inhumans here again with their new moon base. Just a lot of really cool stuff. There's so much going on in this run. Honestly, it's one of those again where as I'm looking through it, you know, I want to reread it again. I've already mentioned that, but I'm reminded as just how many different things go on in this run. Because I've not read this in probably this whole run, maybe in about 5 years or so. It's been a long time, to be honest, since I read it. So even as I'm looking through this, I'm remembering little things here and there myself. But far more, you know, it just, it makes me want to reread it. I don't know about any of you watching this, but certainly that's the effect it has on me. Great to see John Byrne drawing some of the X-Men again here in this issue as well. Yeah, just beautiful artwork. I really can't praise the artwork enough, really, you know. What can I say? Big John Byrne fan. I like his stories, I like his artwork, enjoy his writing. I enjoy this Fantastic Four run. Is it better than the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby stuff? That's a really tough one, because obviously that's the classic original series, but maybe I do. I think I maybe actually do just slightly prefer this John Byrne run overall. I think especially in the second volume, I think overall I do like this first volume a lot, but I think that a lot of the more interesting stuff happens in volume 2, when there's a, for example, there's a big shake-up in the team lineup for quite a while, which I think was very well handled. If you're familiar with the run, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, I'm sure. But I will be discussing that more when I actually look at that book itself. But for now, let me know, you know, what you think of this particular volume, or just, you know, John Byrne's run as a whole on Fantastic Four. We see She-Hulk here appearing. She-Hulk, obviously a character John Byrne's got a pretty strong affinity for. I've already covered the sensational She-Hulk Omnibus by John Byrne. That was actually one of the first videos I ever did on this channel last year. Yeah, would love to hear the thoughts of others though when it comes to this run. You know, whether or not you agree with me that it's basically some of the best ever Fantastic Four comics that there's ever been, because that's how strongly I feel about it anyway. Maybe you don't like it, you know, and I realise not everybody's going to love this run, I'm sure, but whatever opinions you may have, I'm happy to hear your thoughts and just, yeah, hear what anybody has to say. But yeah, this is, I mean, this is a big book, you know, it's a thick book. It's over 1,000 pages when you include all the extras in the back. Ah, this story, I think I just want to touch on this one. Fantastic Four Annual 17, which I think, if I'm remembering rightly, I might be mistaken here, but I'm pretty sure this is a story that brings back the original Skrulls, which the Fantastic Four encountered back in, I want to say, issue 2, like way back at the beginning, when they met some Skrulls and those Skrulls were turned into cows at the end of that story. I think this is the story where those cows come back. I don't know, I might be mistaking that for another story, but there is definitely a story where that happens, and that's really cool. Anyway, yeah, it is. Yeah, this is the one. Yes, I'm remembering it rightly. Some scenes here from that second issue and the way that ended. Yeah, what a great throwback that is, honestly, to such a, I imagine such an overall a forgotten story. But yeah, I mean, John Byrne is, you know, openly admitted he's a big fan of Fantastic Four, so it only makes sense for him to throw in some kind of crazy fan service like that. Remember some of those obscure details. Yeah, Doom again, Galactus again. I mean, John Byrne just draws such a fantastic version of all these characters. No pun intended, I keep saying that, but fantastic really is the word. It's the, very fittingly it's the word, but it's the key word that describes so much of the stories in here, in my opinion. Oh, man, what a great run. Really is. Neymar. See a bit of Neymar there. John Byrne's Neymar. Also very cool. I think this is the issue where there's a big fight with Dr. Doom and he seemingly dies at the end of it. Yeah, just his mask is left behind. But nobody ever really dies, you know. Not in comics. Not unless you're Uncle Ben or Bruce Wayne's parents. But yeah, let's have a look at some extras in the back then. Pretty dramatic way for the book to leave off there, with Neymar desperately seeking help. But we will see where that goes in volume 2. Let's take a look through some of these extras. We've got some character sketches here by Byrne. yeah, really nice. Such a great artist, really, really great artist. I mean, if anyone doesn't enjoy John Byrne's artwork, fair enough, but I can't possibly understand why. I just think he just, I don't know, it just draws so ridiculously well. And that was the DM variant as well for the for this omnibus. It will be the DM variant again, I believe. I don't like it as much though. I think it just doesn't look as cool as the 236 cover in my opinion. But it doesn't really matter. Either way, you're getting a great book, whichever cover choice you go for. And that is the Fantastic Four Omnibus by John Byrne, Volume 1. I hope that this has been an insightful look through the book, if you didn't know too much about it maybe, or you just needed a bit of, maybe a bit more information to help you decide whether or not to pick the book up. I hope I've maybe helped you sway your mind one way or the other on that decision. But nevertheless, thank you very much for watching the video all the way through. I appreciate that as always. I'm always happy to hear the thoughts, so as I mentioned, if you want to share any opinions on this run in the comments, please do and let me know what you think of it. But other than that, I'll see you soon, hopefully with Volume 2 of this book. Thanks for watching.